They typically play defense at Ohio State, Clemson, few others year in, year out. But I don't know that anyone stacks up the defensive talent like Alabama and Georgia year in, year out. We got Palmer Thombs on the line to talk up the Dogs on defense as we head towards spring camp here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Please like the video, share these videos out on social media. So if you enjoy the content, others will as well. So please share the videos on social media. And subscribe, hit that bell for the notifications to know when we're going live. All right, Palmer, appreciate you, as always, breaking down the personnel. I love the personnel breakdowns because it gets me set for what's going to happen this spring. Then I watch the spring game. I know who's who, and it gets me set to then track it into August. Malik Herring, as we look at the defense, would be the one main guy that's gone off the front four.
Yeah, that defensive line got a huge boost in the return, literally and figuratively, in the return of Jordan Davis. He is a mammoth of a man, and is going to be the focal point of this Georgia defense. I think last year you would have looked at the secondary as the strong suit, and this year you're probably looking up front at the defensive line. Jordan Davis, like I said, he's a big name, and had 16 tackles last season, 1 sack. He doesn't show up a ton on the stat sheet, and I think that's because he draws double teams, which opens things up for other guys on that defensive line, like Devontae Wyatt, Jalen Carter, Trayvon Walker. Those are guys that are going to be coming into bigger roles this year. Wyatt is returning for his 5th year at of college ball. He had an impressive 2 tackles for loss in the bowl game against Cincinnati. And was one of Georgia's leaders on the defensive line, leading tackler on the defensive line with 25 tackles. And then I think you look at those 2 younger guys that I mentioned, Jalen Carter and Trayvon Walker. Walker, this will be his first year as the full-time starting defensive end, like you said, with Malik Herring headed to the NFL. Unfortunately, he suffered a torn ACL in preparation for the draft. So, our thoughts are with him. But looking at Walker, he showed a lot of potential as a freshman. Did not, do nearly as much this past season, but certainly has the talent there. And then Jalen Carter as well. He showed he's a dynamic player, played on offense, played on defense for Georgia. On offense when it came to those goal line packages early on in the season, caught a touchdown. So there's certainly a lot of excitement about what this defensive line can bring.
Palmer, when we look at the linebackers, Monty Rice was always a guy that from the time he stepped on the field as a freshman did his job, started to get significant playing time right out of the gate, 219 total tackles during his career. But it was more or less Aziz Julari who made the disruptive plays in the opponent's backfield and really made a name for himself and will probably earn a pretty substantial paycheck here pretty soon because of it. 12.5 tackles for loss and 9.5 sacks. So those 2 guys gone, but plenty of talent back.
Yeah, those were definitely 2 of the bigger leaders on this Georgia defense last year. Monty Rice being less, neither of those guys was a huge vocal leader as much as they led by their example. And I think, that really showed with Monty Rice pushing through, several injuries. He battled a foot injury, and had a huge game against Tennessee, played in 9 games and made 49 tackles for the Bulldogs last year. And then Ojulari, like you mentioned, was a, disruptive force for Georgia, getting in the backfield. Had a huge game against Cincinnati to close out his career in red and black with 3 sacks, and 2 forced fumbles there. Closed out the game with a safety strip, with a safety in the end zone, to clinch the game for Georgia. Those are going to be 2 of the tougher pieces to replace on this defense. But looking at what they've got returning, I think it starts with Nakobe Dean on defense, and he made 71 tackles to lead the team. By far there. He had 1.5 sacks, 12 quarterback hurries, which is a stat that Georgia emphasizes quite a bit. I think looking at that, he's going to be the leader of this defense. He's probably not going to give it a go in spring ball this in a couple of weeks here. He suffered a torn labrum and he'll be rehabbing that, but he should be ready to go by the fall. And regardless of whether or not he practices this spring, you can write him in as a starter for Georgia. Outside of him, Quay Walker and Channing Tindall are two guys that made big contributions for the Bulldogs. As Georgia likes to play four linebackers. They use those four, those three along with Monty Rice. When Rice was out, they really relied heavily on Dean, Walker, and Tindall. They also used Tresman Marshall in there at times. Used Adam Anderson as an inside linebacker at times, more so in a third down defense and spying the quarterback role. He's going to take on a bigger role as a outside linebacker this year, his more traditional position, but he's still going to be used in some of those specialty roles, as well as Nolan Smith. He's another guy that was former #1 player in the country. He's going to be called upon to replace some of the production that Azeez Ojulari is leaving behind.
Let's go to the defensive backs. Again, Georgia content here provided by Palmer Toms on Dogs 247 Sports. So head on over there for the best in Bulldog football coverage. And of course, here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Yeah, DBs is obviously, we talked about it before we started to record and you started to run down the names. And it always brings to mind when these guys were 4- and 5-star recruits and really being sought after and were big signees. Tyson Campbell comes to the forefront of my mind as being that guy that everybody was searching for across the SEC and the big programs across the country. Now he's moving along with most of your top cornerbacks, and Tyreek Stevenson headed down to Miami.
Yeah, like you said, it's going to be a lot of new faces on the field for Georgia in the secondary. Tyson Campbell at cornerback, Eric Stokes is gone as well, DJ Daniel, and like you said, Tyreek Stevenson, who played more of a specialty role there as the star and nickelback. But he's gone as well, transferred out to Miami. He started the bowl game at corner, opposite of Campbell, while Stokes and Daniel sat out. And I think Georgia was going to be counting on Tyreek Stevenson to play a bigger role, maybe as a traditional cornerback this year. Well, they got to find someone else. Looking at the other guys that are gone, Mark Webb, he's another guy that he was a senior this past year, split time with Stevenson as the star and as an extra defensive back. He was a key player for this Georgia team. He's gone, as well as Richard LeCount on the back end. Georgia got a taste of what life was like without Richard after he suffered an off-field injury, was involved in a motorcycle accident probably midway through the year. It was after the Kentucky game on October 31st. So he missed the final 5 games of the season for Georgia. Looking at who's going to be replacing those guys, I'll start on the back end with Lewis Seen and Chris Smith there. Those two guys, really got a lot of time together in the secondary. After LeCount was injured, Seen, really took on a big role. He finished as the team's second leading tackler. Chris Smith stepped up and filled the position. I think back to the Auburn game, second game of the year, when LeCount got ejected for targeting in the first half. Georgia was counting on Chris Smith to come in and be a key contributor there. He filled in there. He's done a really great job throughout his Georgia career of filling in spots and was called upon late in that season to be a starter and be a leader on this defense and did so, phenomenally. I think looking at the cornerback positions, that's where a lot of the concern for Georgia would be. Keely Ringo is a name that I would watch there. He was the #1 cornerback in the country. His year was a true freshman this past year, but missed the entire season after he suffered a torn labrum during preseason camp. He'll be probably taking on one of the major roles for Georgia at corner. Jalen Kimber is another guy. He was a freshman this past year. Amir Speed could take on a bigger role. I think Latavius Brinney, he's a guy that played in the bowl game as well as the Missouri game, at that star position. When Stevenson shifted over to corner, Latavius Brinney came on and played star and did so pretty well. He would be a guy that I would pencil in as a replacement at star. But I think, cornerback and secondary in general is probably an area where Georgia is looking at the transfer portal. I think Kirby Smart indicated to us the other day that he is, he's not against the transfer portal, but he wants to use, to develop the guys on his team, the guys that he recruited out of high school. He's not afraid to use the transfer portal when he needs to. Georgia picked up 3 transfers this past season, had 2 the year before, and so they've used it in the secondary before too. They got Maurice Smith from Alabama in Smart's first season. They've used it in the secondary before, but I think they're gonna try and develop some of these younger guys at corner. Not to mention the fact that they've got 4 signees in that role in Javon Bullard, David Daniel, Nyland Green, and Kamari Lassiter.
Yeah, Nyland Green in particular, a top 4 cornerback in the country out of the Peach State. And, of course, Georgia loaded in high school talent, and most of those guys at the top of the board going to the Bulldogs. Got Palmer Thomas on the line to talk Georgia football. As you look at, even though we went through the defensive line and the linebackers, anybody from the 2021 class that you think could break through and get there in regards to, at the top of the board? We've got guys like Xavier Sori and Small Munden at the outside linebacker position. Any thought that, of course, there's got to be a lot of football played in the spring and throughout August to see where they stand, but obviously they've been recruited. We're talking 5 stars right there.
Yeah, those 2 guys are 5 stars and certainly will probably contribute for Georgia in a limited role this year. They've got a lot of talent in front of them in terms of that linebacker room. That it's probably where Georgia's loaded the most. Either they're on the offensive line. They've got several 5 stars on the offensive side of the ball. But Xavier Sori, he's a name, and Smile Munden. Those are both guys that I would watch. Sori is probably going to miss the spring. He suffered an injury, and all the details on that are not out yet. I think we'll learn a lot more about that once spring ball rolls around. And maybe we hear a little bit more from Kirby Smart on that front. But those are certainly 2 guys that I would watch. On the defensive line, Jonathan Jefferson and Tyrion Ingram Dawkins. Those 2 are guys that I think can contribute. Those big guys up front, they get gassed, and Georgia needs depth there. They've got several great frontline guys, and they're going to be counting on some younger guys at that position as well. Outside of the top guys, you're going to be looking at Zion Logue, Nazir Stackhouse, Bill Norton, as well as Tremel Walthor, Timon Mitchell, as well as those 2 true freshmen that I mentioned in Jefferson and Ingram Dawkins.
16 of the 20 already in camp in regards to as soon as, obviously, Georgia hits the practice field, and that's coming up very soon. Palmer Tom's on the line from Dogs 247 Sports. Encourage you to head on over there, of course, for Georgia football coverage as we're getting close to spring ball. All right, Palmer, we put you to work. You nailed it, running through the offense and the defense for us. So if you missed any videos out there, please check them out right here. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Palmer, we'll catch up with you soon. Appreciate the effort.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.